Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Alberta's amazing Ukrainian village here in the Elk Island area. Thank you so much to Ukrainian Village for welcoming us here, and I'm delighted to be joined by the local MLA, Minister Jackie Armstrong-Homeniuk, who also happens to be chairman of Alberta's Ukrainian Advisory Committee and has been doing great work there for 3 years. Minister Matt Jones of Children's Services, and Arisia Boychuk of the Ukrainian Canadian Council Alberta chapter for another announcement about support for Ukrainian refugees who have come to Alberta. As we know, this terrible conflict in Ukraine is now in its 4th month of Vladimir Putin's brutal and illegal, inhumane invasion of the homeland of hundreds of thousands of Albertans. And there is a special deep connection between Alberta and Ukraine, and that is why we are proud to have opened our doors of refuge to Ukrainians fleeing the violence of that conflict. Of course, men between the ages of 18 and 65, I believe, are required to stay at home to help defend their nation, but many women and children have lost their homes, lost their families, and are seeking at least temporary shelter. And of course, we understand that thousands have already arrived in Alberta. We expect many more to come over the months to come, as this appears to be a protracted conflict. I am inspired by the courage and determination of the Ukrainian people who refuse to give up. As I've mentioned before, as Canada's Minister of National Defence, I deployed the Canadian Armed Forces to Ukraine in Operation Unifier in 2015 to help them better defend their nation, to improve the effectiveness, the operational and tactical effectiveness of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. And I want to salute the Canadian soldiers who over the past 7 years have dramatically improved Ukrainian military effectiveness. So we can sadly expect this to be a protracted conflict, and that means there will be many refugees seeking at least temporary shelter here in Canada. I always say that I hope that most of those individuals feel that they can go home when sovereignty and peace are restored. Of course, some will choose to stay in Canada, but we don't want to help Vladimir Putin depopulate Ukraine, particularly of so many of its bright young people who represent a future for the country's post-war reconstruction. But Alberta has been forward-leaning, providing more support than any other province in Canada. We have provided $2.2 million for settlement and language services delivered across the province, $1 million to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress and the Ukrainian Canadian Foundation. We provided $5 million of support to the Ukrainian World Congress to equip 5,000 members of the Ukrainian Territorial Defense Force with defensive equipment. And we also provided $5 million to the Canada-Ukraine Foundation for additional humanitarian aid, on top of $350,000 to the UCC Alberta chapter to assist them with their settlement efforts and providing equipment for people in Ukraine. So today I'm here with these ministers to make an announcement of further support. Starting July 25th, Ukrainian evacuees arriving in Alberta will be eligible for new forms of aid. These additional measures include temporary financial assistance for up to 6 months to cover basic living expenses like food, clothing, and rent. In fact, this support reflects what Albertans would receive in similar circumstances. And if the evacuees have children under the 12 years of age or younger, they will be able to apply for 6 months of funding for childcare costs through the childcare subsidy program. With so many men staying in Ukraine to help defend the nation, we expect many arrivals will be single-parent families, as we've experienced so far. So this expanded support will be key for people whose lives have been thrown into chaos by the invasion. We can't take away their fears for those who have been left behind, but we can at least dispel the uncertainties that come with trying to start over and make ends meet in a new country. Thanks to this extra support, parents and kids will have time to catch their breath as they begin adjusting to their new lives in Alberta. Minister Armstrong-Homeniuk will have more to say about the details of the program, as will Minister Jones. As I say, sadly, it appears that Ukraine is in this for the long run. The war with Russia shows every sign of becoming a protracted conflict. And so we want the people of Ukraine who have come here to know that we are here for them. We are providing a more complete and generous package of support than any Canadian province, and we will continue to do what's necessary to ensure that their time of refuge in Canada is one of security and stability for them and their families. And with that, I will invite Minister Armstrong-Homeniuk to add some comments.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm honored to be here with Premier Kenney, Minister Jones, and Arisia Boychuk, and so many of my constituents and supporters who have joined us today for this important announcement. It is great to be here at the Ukrainian village to showcase the important history and deep roots of the Ukrainian community here in Alberta. I'm standing in front of the Pilipo House, of which my ancestors had built when they originally came to Canada. My Baba, Annie Pilipo Hooley, was one of the first donors of a bench and other household goods to the museum. 130 years ago, Ukrainians first began settling in our province, leaving Ukraine to build new lives for their families. And throughout the years, Ukrainian settlers and their descendants built thriving communities and have become valuable members and leaders in our province. Today, the world is watching in horror as an unjust and devastating war continues to unfold in Ukraine. And once again, millions of Ukrainians have been forced to leave their homes and are coming to Alberta to start a new life. That's why I'm extremely proud to announce a new program starting July 25th, which will provide up to 6 months of support to help eligible Ukrainians arriving in Alberta with their basic needs. Alberta's government is committed to supporting Ukrainians coming to Alberta. In fact, if any Ukrainians need urgent help now, there are emergency supports you can access. For more information, call Alberta Supports at 1-877-644-9992, or you can visit the local Alberta Supports office, or you can go online to alberta.ca/Ukraine. This help is available to you in Ukrainian and more than 100 other languages. We will continue working with settlement agencies to ensure Ukrainian newcomers can access health care, enroll their children in school, find childcare, get an ID or driver's license, and access the help they need right now. As the situation evolves, Alberta will continue to work closely with the federal government, the Ukrainian community, and settlement-serving organizations to make sure Ukrainians feel safe and supported as they arrive in our province. I want to thank all of the community partners and newcomer organizations for their commitment to help Ukrainians arriving in Alberta. The world has been inspired by the courage and determination of Ukrainians fighting for their freedom. We will help you build a home in our province as long as you are here, and we will stand with you throughout this conflict. Thank you. I'd like to now call up my colleague, Minister Matt Jones.
Thank you for that introduction. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with Premier Kenney, Minister Armstrong-Homeniuk, and Arisia Boychuk to share more good news on additional supports for displaced Ukrainians arriving in Alberta. For thousands of Ukrainian nationals forced to flee their homes and homeland, Alberta is a safe haven. It's been great to see Albertans come together to welcome and help those escaping violence and destruction to build new lives. Alberta's government is also committed to ensuring critical supports and services are available and accessible when needed. One of those critical supports is safe, accessible, and high-quality childcare for parents with young children. That is why today I'm pleased to announce that we're expanding our childcare subsidy so Ukrainian nationals fleeing war can access affordable, high-quality licensed childcare for their children. The subsidy will apply to all eligible childcare programs, including daycare, preschool, out-of-school care, or day home provided through a licensed day home agency. The application for subsidy can be accessed and submitted online through the Supports for Ukrainians page on alberta.ca. To apply for the subsidy, parents will obtain a specially issued Alberta healthcare card. and parents' proof of income will not be required. To further help address families' childcare needs, Children's Services will work with operators and community organizations to identify and support access to other appropriate programs. In addition, family resource networks across the province provide a range of supports for vulnerable families, and Ukrainian families arriving in Canada will be able to access those services and supports free of charge. I would also encourage individuals and families to call the Alberta Supports Contact Centre toll-free at 1-877-644-9992 if they have questions about what services and supports are available and how to access them. In closing, I would like to assure all of the Ukrainian families arriving here that we are here for you during this difficult time, and we are committed to ensuring your children are safe, protected, and learning. I would now like to invite Orysia Boychuk, President of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, Alberta Provincial Council, to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, and good morning to everybody. Premier Jason Kenney, Minister Jackie Armstrong-Homeniuk, and Minister Matt Jones. On behalf of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, Alberta Provincial Council, I'd like to thank the Alberta's government for the financial income support and childcare subsidy that has been announced this morning. This is definitely an additional support that was not available to Ukrainian newcomers prior to today, and we are confident this will definitely help support and contribute to the Ukrainian nationals' successful integration in Canadian society. We also thank the Alberta government for its unwavering support for the past 4 months as Russia continues to wage war on Ukraine. Thousands of newcomers have arrived in Alberta, and they are actively working through the process of settling in and accessing the many services the government has offered, such as education services from kindergarten to grade 12, Alberta Healthcare, daycare subsidy, emergency assistance, English as a second language classes, and the list goes on. These are all critical and key components in assisting our newcomers, and we thank you for your support. With these supports, we are able to help contribute to a safe haven for Ukrainians seeking refuge in Alberta. I would also like to take this opportunity to recognize and thank Alberta's government for the $11 million in humanitarian aid and defense weapons for Ukraine. The government of Alberta's unwavering support for Ukraine and Ukrainians arriving in Alberta is deeply, deeply appreciated. Every Albertan must be so proud that Alberta continues to stand with the people of Ukraine in this battle of justice, truth, and liberty. Thank you. Дякую. Слава Україні. Героям слава.
Thank you, everyone. That concludes our speaking portion for the day. We're going to move to the media Q&A. There's a media mic right there, so if you're here in person, please just line up behind it. Go ahead, Tom.
I want to talk about the rollout of this. Have we learned lessons over the last few months to ensure that the smooth rollout of these programs? Have there been any hiccups? And what kind of staffing in place? We're seeing lineups in other areas of government. Or are we going to see a smooth rollout of this?
Well, I think so, because these are programs that already exist, so it's just expanding eligibility criteria. I should report that as of June 8th, we record that 3,833 Ukrainian nationals had arrived in Alberta. I think we can expect a few thousand more. So we're not talking about tens of thousands of people that will jam up the system. But these are programs that are already in place, and if there are people who would like to apply for the income support, they should call 1-877-644-9992. And if they're interested in support for the child care program, they should call 1-844-644-5165. I've had no reports of too many administrative hassles. Of course, it's all now. The challenge would be probably linguistic. For many of these folks arriving here, speak little or no English, and so we have worked with community organizations, including immigrant settlement groups, to make sure that they have folks on staff who speak Ukrainian, who can help as translators in accessing programs like this. So that might be one gap that's sometimes not seamless, but I know the community groups are doing their best to help folks who don't speak English.
Go ahead and get you on a different topic, inflation, affordability. You mentioned this week and a potential of further supports coming. What sort of supports can the government provide that haven't already?
Well, Alberta has been more generous in helping people address the huge problem with inflation and the cost of living through the abatement of the provincial fuel tax. That's on an annual basis a $1.4 billion savings. The forthcoming electricity rebates that will be on people's bills in July this month, and the forthcoming natural gas rebate as well. So we have been looking at what additional support we can provide, and we'll be making an announcement about that later this week. But certainly one of the biggest cost drivers is certainly fuel and energy costs. We recognize that, and that's what we're looking at. We do acknowledge that Alberta's budget improves as energy prices go up, and so I think there is a strong argument that Alberta's government should reflect that by helping people with the cost of energy. So that's the area that we're looking at. You know, we can't directly control the cost of food and housing and things like that, but we do have more policy levers over the cost of energy. I would just reiterate our call on the federal government to stop hammering people with the carbon tax. I mean, here we have stepped forward, given people a break on the fuel tax on electricity and natural gas, and the feds actually increased the cost of the carbon tax by 25%. So I think Ottawa has shown that it's completely out of touch, and unfortunately there are some politicians who actually want to drive people into energy poverty so they consume less energy. That's like trying to fix a problem of people being overweight by making food unaffordable. I think it's ridiculous. Energy is a necessary staple of life, and we shouldn't be making it unaffordable for people to drive to work, to heat their homes, and to live normal lives.
Do we have another question in person? Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask if you were referring to the increased cost with inflation, if there's going to be any relief to municipalities who are also feeling the pinch of trying to provide their services for residents.
Well, inflation hits every organization, including governments at all levels, but that's up to those governments. And so the answer is no, we have no plans in that respect. I would point out, however, that municipalities that buy fuel are benefiting from our fuel tax abatement. We just extended it, for example, for school buses. And that's going to save millions, perhaps tens of millions of dollars for parents who would otherwise have to pay higher busing fees for their kids. So that support passes on to school boards, for example. But as a general statement, this is a challenge for every level of government in every part of the world, and so now we are in discussions with some municipalities about how to address construction inflation on infrastructure projects in particular, and those discussions are ongoing.
Okay. My only other question is in regards to FCSS. Will there be additional funding for them to help on the local level with the various programs and services that they will need?
That's not something that has been brought forward at this point. We have provided support to if you're talking about the Ukrainian refugees, both the Government of Canada and the Government of Alberta is providing support to immigrant settlement organizations, some of which also receive FCSS funding.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions in person? Go ahead.
Hi, I just had a question. I'm just looking for more details about the child care subsidy for newcomers. I was just wondering how much of a subsidy can newcomers expect, and will it be kind of similar to the federal $10 a day deal?
Thank you for the question. The subsidy and affordability grant amounts vary based on the age of the child, length of the stay, all of these things, but it should average out to around $600 a month. And yes, it does mirror the federal early learning and child care agreement with Alberta.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
With no other questions in person, we'll go to the phones. Operator, can you please put through our first caller?
Johnson, Edmonton Journal.
Hi, thanks for taking my questions. I'm not sure if this is for Minister, I think this is for Minister Jones and Minister Armstrong-Homeniuk, but just in terms of the specific details of these supports with the child care subsidy and for this financial aid for up to 6 months, how much exactly is involved with the financial aid for up to 6 months? And out of which programs is this money coming exactly? It's coming out of existing programs, right?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'll start with income support and pass on to Minister Jones' comments about the child care support. Income support comes out of Alberta's income support program, which is typically known as welfare. And a single adult would receive a minimum of $745 a month in core benefits. A single adult with one child, it would be nearly $1,200 a month. 2 children, $1,300. 3 children, $1,400, and so forth. A couple with no children would receive $1,116. In terms of the total overall cost, we estimate between a cost to Alberta's government of between $15.1 million and $37.8 million. And that's based on a range of the low end of 13,000 newcomers qualifying and 33,000 newcomers at the high end. So we're talking about a very substantial financial commitment here. Potentially, we estimate up to $38 million. And Matt, on the childcare.
Thank you again for the question. Again, the cost per child will fluctuate based on the hours of care and the age of the child, but the cost to Alberta to provide access to the affordable child care through our combination of subsidy and affordability grants will average $614 a month, and this is of course funded in partnership with the federal government through the Alberta Canada Early Learning and Childcare Agreement. To access these supports, parents must obtain a temporary Alberta healthcare card with an expiry date, and the children must be under 12 years of age and not yet attending grade 7. Thank you.
Do you have a follow-up, Lisa?
Yeah, I wanted to ask if back in April you announced $2.2 million going towards various initiatives to help displaced Ukrainians arriving in the province. I'm wondering if you have any measurable impact from that money. If you can talk about where it went and what exactly it did. And I'm also wondering, in terms of what you're announcing today, are these programs being expanded exclusively to newcomers from Ukraine or newcomers from anywhere around the world?
The answer on the second question is this is for Ukrainian nationals alone, recognizing the unique circumstances and the particularly strong ties between Canada and Ukraine. On the first question, the reports we've had are positive. Look, there have been some frustrations for sure. For some of the Ukrainians arriving, falling between gaps, not able to get people on the phone who speak Ukrainian, and things like that, as you would expect in a program of this nature. But I want to commend the community for reaching out, putting its arms around the community and helping people walk through availability for all the different programs, getting their kids placed into school, getting transit passes. We worked with the municipalities to make sure that these people would be eligible for transit passes, and finding housing and all of that. So there is no simple, seamless way to make something like this happen. This is it's going to depend a lot on informal networks. Typically, again, of people in the Ukrainian community and the more recent immigrants from Ukraine who understand the Canadian system and can connect people into it. But we're doing, I think, everything we reasonably can at this point as a government, and we're proud to step forward with a very substantial expansion of support. As I say, we estimate between $15 and $38 million of monetary value.
Thank you. Operator, can you please put through our next caller?
There are no other questions in the queue at this time.
Thank you. That concludes our press conference.